My sermon tonight is on the Jonah complex, the worst missionary in the entire Bible. Do any of you guys know anything about psychology? Very little, okay. I love psychology, so I was studying Abraham Maslow. He invented the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is irrelevant to this, but he has a study known as the Jonah complex, and he describes it as the fear of success which prevents self-actualization of one's potential. It is the fear of one's own greatness, the evasion of one's own destiny, or the avoidance of exercising one's talents. Just as the fear of achieving a personal worst can motivate personal growth, the fear of achieving a personal best can also hinder achievement. Albeit this psychological theory is based off the character of Jonah, it can be applied to us in our day-to-day lives. God takes those that are not good enough, and He molds them, He shapes them to be good enough. He shapes them to be perfect for what He has them to do. Like Jonah, we go into this, that's not me. I'm good. I don't need to do this. We run away from the jobs that God gives to us in our day-to-day lives. Going into this, we need to see the similarities between us and Jonah in our lives. And in our lives, God opens doors for us to bless others. Let me read that again, a little bit slower this time. God opens doors for us to bless others. We get the first two parts of that. God opens doors for us. It's to bless others part that we don't always get. We don't see why God opens the doors for us sometimes. Sometimes He has us living below our means to bless others. Sometimes He has us take a week of our vacation to go to Bible camp to help out someone else. Not for our own needs, but for the blessing of others. Like Jonah, God opened the door that sent him to Nineveh, the capital city for the Assyrians who had the Israelites in captivity 40 years after the story takes place. And albeit the Assyrians aren't inherently bad, they were just the enemies of the Israelites. So Jonah didn't want to go to them because they were just out of reach. Like people today, we have people that we know in Boston, in Iraq, in Sierra Leone. They are just out of reach for us. So why should we go out of our way? Why should we go through that open door that God opened for us to bless others when it's so difficult to fall out of our routine? If you would, read with me in Jonah. Jonah 4, beginning at verse 2. In Jonah 2, or chapter 4, beginning verse 2, and so it says, So he prayed to the Lord and said, Ah, Lord, was it not what I said when I was still in my country? Therefore I fled previously to Tarshish, knowing that you are a gracious God and a merciful God, slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness, one who relents from doing harm. Therefore now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than it is to live. After everything Jonah went through, and in a second we'll recap the story of Jonah, but after everything he went through, Jonah thought it would be better for him to die than to go to the Assyrians. Why should he go to someone else's country where in that time they believed they had their own gods? Each country had its own god, and when he went to battle, your God was fighting that God through you. So why should he go and save someone else from their own God when he had his own gods to save him? He thought it was redundant, and the Assyrians were obviously inherently bad since they were his enemy. But I'm going to recap through Jonah, starting with Jonah 1:2. And it reads, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it, for the wickedness has come up before me. In this verse, this is where God is sending Jonah to go to his enemy. It's about 550 miles away from where Jonah was at the time. And Jonah's like, he doesn't want to do it. But he doesn't say anything to God in the first chapter at all. No, he goes to Joppa, a port city, and he takes a 2,500-mile trip through a boat to Tarshish. And albeit he doesn't say anything to God, it is just the resounding, nope, I am not going to go talk to my enemies and save them from you. You can do your own will. And with him leaving from Joppa, God caused a storm around the boat. The people that are on the boat, they do this for a living. They take the 2,500-mile trip day in and day out, so they spend about a day on sea or on land and the rest on sea. The winds and the waves were so bad that they were fearing for their lives. These men don't scare easily. They were scared for their lives because of the winds and the waves that God caused. And in the midst of this storm, they realized that there is no way that any storm can be this bad unless caused by God. And they weren't all Israelites. They started praying to their gods, hoping that they would figure out who caused the problem. Jonah is down in the hold of the boat sleeping. The captain goes down to meet him. Goes down and says, "Why are you sleeping in the middle of the storm? How can you stay asleep? Come up, pray to your God so that this lot will be cast from us." Jonah goes up, knowing full well that it is his problem, that they're in that situation. He knows that he ran from God. He knows that they have to pay the consequences, and that everyone else on the boat is paying the consequences for his mistakes. And still, he won't admit that it was his fault out loud. After casting lots on the boat, the lots fall on Jonah, and they make him recap the story. So after recapping the story of how God sent him to Nineveh, and how he said, "No, I refuse to go to my enemies," here we are, on the boat. After this story that Jonah tells the seamen, they ask, how can we save ourselves from this fault that you have given to us? He says, "Throw me over." Notice, he doesn't say, "Let's turn around, let me go to Nineveh to solve my problems." No. He says, "Throw me over, for I would rather die than to save my enemies from God." After due diligence and praying, let's see, it is in Jonah. It's a little bit later. Jonah 2. No, Jonah 1, later at the end. They pray to God that they be cast from the... Sorry, give me 1 sec. I'm trying to catch my thoughts here. Thank you. Jonah 1:14. And it reads, "Therefore they cried out to the Lord and said, 'We pray, O Lord, please do not let us perish for this man's life. Do not charge us with the innocent blood, for you, O Lord, have done as it pleased you.' And so they picked up Jonah and threw him into the sea, and the sea ceased its raging." With this, the men prayed out to God, to our God, to Jonah's God, to the God of the Israelites. Not all of them being Israelites, they realized that the God of the Israelites was indeed the one and only God. They realized that even God's story is so big that even Jonah's refusal to go to the Assyrians in Nineveh was a lesson to get more people to believe in God.
Yeah.
And with being thrown overboard, a big fish swallows up Jonah, leaving him in a worse place than he started. Now he is in a fish's belly, covered in muck and grime. And that leads us to Jonah 2. This chapter is entitled Jonah's Prayer and God's Answer. But with Jonah's prayer, it's not that he's a thoroughly faithful man. No, it is he has hit rock bottom. He realizes now that there is nowhere else he can go than up. He is in the belly of a fish covered in muck, can only assume what the whale ate, or the fish ate earlier that day. Sorry about that. Thanks for looking up, Wanda. And he reads, I cried out to the Lord because of my affliction, and he answered to me, out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice, for you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the floods surrounded me. All your billows and your waves passed over me. Then I said, I have cast out of your sight. Yet I will look again to your holy temple. The waters surround me, even to my soul. The deep closed around me, reeds were wrapped around my head. I went down to the moorings of the mountain. The earth with its bars closed behind me forever. Yet you have brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God. And with this prayer, one of the most beautiful prayers in the Bible, Jonah is asking for redemption because he knows that he has done wrong. He knows that he should have initially just went to Nineveh and preached to his enemy. And after 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the fish, Jonah is spit up. And with this, he finally starts his trek to Nineveh. And once he makes it to Nineveh, he goes 1 day's walk into the city. And I did a little bit of research. Nineveh is about 3 days walk all around. So 1 day walk for Jonah was the least possible you can do to actually be in the city of Nineveh. And he cries out the lamest sermon in all the Bible. He cries out 40 days more and Nineveh will be overthrown. After saying this, he turns around. He didn't care what they did. But on his way out, he realizes that the Assyrians are repentant. They're thoroughly repentant, even off of his sermon of 40 days more, and you'll be overthrown. Jonah doesn't care. He leaves the city, and he goes onto a hill above the east of the city to watch the demise and downfall of the Assyrians, hoping that God won't be forgiveful of their repentance. But that brings us back to where we started. Jonah 4:2, I'll read it again. And it says, So he prayed to the Lord, Ah, Lord, was not this what I said when I was in my country? Therefore I fled previously to Tarshish, for I know that you are a gracious and merciful God, slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness, one who relents from doing harm. Jonah now realizes, sitting on that cliff top, that God is ultimately forgiving, that even his enemies, if repentant, can be forgiven. Jonah cries out to take his life from him, for he would rather die than to watch his enemies live in abundance. So Jonah goes to suffering himself on top of the mountain. He builds himself a little shelter, hoping that the Assyrians will fall. After he talks to God, he realizes that they won't, and he gives up. God brings up a plant around him to give him shelter and shade. And Jonah is thoroughly thankful for the plant because now he is comfortable again. But in the next day, a worm comes and eats of the plant and makes it wither. Jonah laments for the plant because he lost it. But God says, how can you cry for something that you lost when you did nothing to build it? You did nothing to plant the plant. You just enjoyed its shade. And I sent a worm to destroy it because you did not deserve it. It reminds me of Moses when he was talking to the Israelites. He said, when you go into your vineyards, take one sweep through. Only pick of the grapes once and leave the rest for the mother, the widow, and the foreigner. He tells them this because when they were in Egypt, they knew how to go without. He tells them to only take one sweep through because take only what you need. Take only what God gives you that you need, and the rest leave for the mother, the widow, and the alien. If you would, flip over to Luke 15, beginning at verse 11. Most of us know this story. It's titled The Prodigal Son. And I'll read a couple verses and then I'll recap over the meaning of the story. And in verse 11 it reads, "And he said, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me. And so he divided them to his livelihood. The younger son knew that his father's life was still obviously around. He knew that his older brother would get the bigger portion, but he has the guts to go to his father. Tells him, give me the half that I deserve while you're still alive. Tells him to allow me to go out on my own before my time to do whatever it is I please. And with his half, he goes out and he has a lavish life. He does whatever he wants. He squanders all of his money on earthly fun and whatever he did. It doesn't really go into it. But once he squanders all of his money, he ends up a slave. Not a slave. He ends up a servant. He ends up feeding the pigs. He ends up getting so hungry that he eats the slop that the pigs are eating. As a Jew, you weren't supposed to eat pigs. You weren't supposed to have any of that. But now he's below the pig. He is eating what the pig eats. He is like Jonah in the belly of the fish. He's not covered in muck, but he's eating it. He realizes that if I go to my father's house, even if I come back as a servant and not as the son that I belong as, I will still have a better life than this. So he decides to turn back and go back to his house. He has a whole speech prepared. Father, forgive me for I have gone and wasted all your money. Bring me back and allow me to just be a servant in your house. He doesn't realize that his father has been standing on the porch every day looking for him, hoping, praying that he will come back because his son was lost. His son was inherently dead at the time to him. So his son comes back over the hill one day. His father's been out there for, you can only assume, years. His son is going down the walkway saying his speech that he prepared for his father. Father, forgive me for I have squandered your money. Please allow me to be a servant in your household. He keeps repeating this as he walks down. And his father runs up and embraces him. He kills the fatted calf and throws a big party where he was lost and dead to him. But now he was back and was alive. When his older brother comes in from the field, he laments to his father, why have you never killed the fatted calf for me? I never got a young calf to celebrate with my friends and with my family. But the father retorts back to him, for your brother was lost and now he is found.
Yeah.
He has already used his portion. Everything that is mine now will fall for you. You have my inheritance. This falls the same for us and God. Whenever we leave God and we come back, we need to realize that we have the full inheritance of God no matter what. I had more prepared. I could have sworn I wrote it down. But apparently, I did not. So I'm going to have to leave you with that. But I'll also flip over to Deuteronomy 9. I'm not the paraphrase, so I don't believe that it is Deuteronomy 9. But like God said to Jonah when when the plant was destroyed, it was also the Israelites. God gave them vineyards that they did not build, wells that they did not dig. He gave them everything that they needed for an abundant life, and they did nothing to deserve of it. Even when in captivity, or in the desert walking with Moses, he gave them a light to follow during the night by a pillar of fire, and manna in the morning to feed them. I guess the moral of my story is that even if we give the resounding nope to God, we can't be the person that turns away from all of our responsibilities. We can't be the person that doesn't realize when God is opening a door for us to bless others, that the last part is the most important part of it. We need to realize that God is opening the door for us to bless others. After you, Brother Birch.
Okay, well, I'll stand.